Hey, in this video I'm going to talk about the difference between weight shift and pressure shift. So for you to really understand what's going on in your swing, it'll be very helpful to understand these concepts. Stay tuned. So I believe that modern swing styles have really tended to overvalue pressure shift and undervalue weight shift. And you can really see this when you watch videos of a classic swing from, say, the 60s or 70s to a modern swing, let's say in the last 10 or 20 years. Now let's start with a pressure shift. A pressure shift, we can measure pressure if we had a force plate on the ground. If I'm standing on a force plate, ideally it would be a dual force plate, one force plate under each of my feet, so I can easily measure what my feet are doing versus the ground. And the force will come in three vectors. Of course, it is vertical, it'll be on this axis, and it'll also be on this axis. So three different dimensions of force. So now with a pressure shift, let's say I'm standing equally on both feet. Of course, you're going to see a little bit of wobble if you were to read the feedback on the force plates, because we don't stand perfectly still. We're always in process of balancing. So you see this little wobble in the numbers of the force plate. But what I can do is I can exude a force vertically down into one plate. That would be called a pressure shift. I could do that something like this. Just kind of push down on that plate. Now, the way I can do that is simply, very simply, I can make a very small shift in the center of my mass. So let's say the center of my mass is center of my feet, just below the belly button. I can make maybe a 1-inch shift in that. And then I can also drop my center of gravity. And by dropping my center of gravity, like you're going to do this, try that on a scale sometimes. Well, the scale will read 0 pounds while you're falling, but as soon as you start to try to slow out of that fall and then stand back up again, the weight in a manual scale will spin around to 300, 400, 500 pounds. So I'm making a little bit of a shift to the right, and I'm dropping my center of mass, and I can really make this back force plate read a very high number. However, I can also do this while maintaining the force on the left-hand plate. I don't even need to subside that. I can leave all that weight here and just step into this foot. So you're going to see actually not a huge decrease in pressure here, a huge increase in pressure here. So all of a sudden, since it's dynamic, you're not actually going to weigh for that instant the same amount as your body weighed at the beginning before you started to move. In fact, I can increase my overall weight by doing that exercise. So the force will make it seem like I weigh more than I really do. So the problem with the pressure shift is it's temporary. In other words, I can't stand on it. I can't balance. If I just do this, yeah, I've put pressure into the plate, but if I pick this leg up, I fall. Not only that, I don't have to really decrease. I don't really have to decrease the pressure in the front plate all that much, so that when if I were to step over to the left foot, like let's say in a downswing, I'm not really able to increase it by an order of magnitude that an actual mass shift would do. Now, by contrast, a weight shift, we're talking about moving mass or body parts back and forth across the center line. So again, if I stand anatomical like this, and let's say the center of mass is cutting right down the middle between my feet, and again, the center of mass is just below my belly button, between my belt buckle and my belly button is my center of mass. Now, if I start moving body parts, let's say, for example, I draw my arm back. I have moved the weight of my arm across the center line. And of course, the further I move it in distance, the further my center of mass actually moves in that direction. Now, my particle center has stayed the same, but overall, I've shifted weight behind the center line. Now, There's a lot of body parts we can shift behind the center line. We could shift, like I said, the arm. The right arm will move further away from center line. Then I can also move, by moving my ankle and knee, I can actually shift my thigh and my knee, and with a little help of my pelvis, I can actually shift everything except for my left foreleg. My left foreleg is the only body part, the only segment now that remains in front of the center line. Now with a weight shift, what you get that you don't get with the pressure shift is you get balance. So watch this. I can balance on this leg with all my mass behind the ball. And what this is setting me up to do, especially if I was to also, let's say, raise my center of mass, is it's really going to help me come crashing down to put a massive amount of force and pressure back into the front plate. Now all that force going into the ground is going to help stabilize us, brace us for a big hit, a big throw of the club head, and it can be readily translated into rotational speed. So we get a lot of rotation, a lot of hit, a little bit of linear speed, but certainly there is a heck of a lot more potential for creating ground forces through this type of windup, like a baseball pitcher would make. I bet you I can double almost what someone doing a pressure shift can do. I can really squish that front plate as opposed to just a temporary little bump and drop. Sure, you could say that overall I've got more force on this back leg very, very temporarily, but I'm certainly not quite as set up for a big shift and turn and more power. Now the classic swings, let's say like Jack Nicklaus, Sam Snead, guys back then in that era, well, they exhibited generally much more of a weight shift. You would see them shifting much more of their body weight and their mass and their segments behind center line and then crash them over to the left. That's how they would get a lot of power in those days. Nowadays, this movement of the pelvis and the knee and the ankle isn't quite as in style, and so you see a little bit more of the pressure shift style. Now, which one is better? Well, really depends on what you're trying to do with that particular shot or what you're trying to do with your golf swing. For example, a pressure shift can be okay if you're willing to sacrifice some power in order to better control your low point being in front of the ball. So if you were to just to do a little pressure shift like this, but essentially keep the pelvis in the center, or even left of center like they would tell you to do in stack and tilt, you could do a little bit of a pressure shift. And when you step over, there's not quite the potential for speed and power, but for some of you out there, it may give you a little advantage in translating your low point in front of the ball. So if you hit the ball fat a lot or thin, all you're trying to do, don't care as much about distance, you just want to hit it clean all the way around the course with some compression, then it's a style that potentially would be valid for you. Now, if you're just playing an approach shot from say 150 yards and in, that's not a swing that necessarily needs all this big weight shift like you might do if you were either trying to hit a driver really hard or if you were into, let's say, long drive, where they're going to move. In fact, you're seeing some long drivers now take swings like that in order to ramp up the forces going into the ground, get more club head speed. However, they can trade club head speed for some control. So they might have some control issues. As long as they can get one ball out of 6 in, they could win the title. So certainly if you're seeking more power and distance, you'll definitely want to move towards a style of swing that shifts more mass or shifts more weight. Something that does a little bit more of this. This would be what I'm exhibiting here, the Austin pivot. This would be a compromise of the pitch style shift of weight. See, all my weight is behind the center line here. And then I'm going to crash it all in front of the line as I release the pitch. This would be a smaller hybrid of what you might see in the Happy Gilmore swing, which would be the epitome, that run-up style would be the epitome of maximum amount that you could shift your weight and potentially get ground force and power. The Austin pivot is a compromise that keeps less timing issues, but maintains as much as the weight shifting as possible, since probably the heaviest part of the body, the one with the most mass, is probably your pelvis, because it includes, you know, the inner thighs, the glutes, even into the lower back. That's a lot of chunk right there. And you swing that on this side of the line, unweighing this foot, and that really allows you to step down and turn for power. All right, let me see if I can show you one of each swing. You can see the difference between the two. First, I'll start with a pressure shift swing. And now let's see if I can demonstrate a weight shift swing, pushing as much of my body weight behind the center line. Now for the same amount of effort, my club head speed went up 6 miles an hour there. Not a very scientific experiment, but I believe you'll also see the difference in power when you move into a more of a weight shift style of swing. Now, so for you pressure shifters out there, yes, of course, it's a valid way of swinging. There are many valid ways of swinging, as we've seen, of all the different styles of swing that have won on the PGA Tour, won majors, and gone into the Hall of Fame. In my opinion, the weight shift method or the mass shift method is the superior method, but I'll meet you out on the golf course and we'll battle it out there. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I'm Steve, and as usual, I'll either see you in the next video or I'll see you longer and straighter down the fairway. Everybody take good care.